Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Aaron Blade, and I'm the editor, creator, and producer of what you're watching right now, Blade Talk. If you are new here, welcome, and you found this presentation helpful and informative, do me a huge favor, hit that like button, do me an even greater favor, and subscribe to my channel. I always appreciate all the support that I am given. So, again, I want to get back into teaching about famous rabbis, Jewish history, our kings, etc. And in light of the 2024 election, I thought this would be a great time to go over the first three kings of the Jewish nation, that being Saul, King David, and King Solomon. So if you're interested, let's hit that intro and let's begin. Okay, so here we are. I wanted to talk a little bit about our leadership when we first entered the Promised Land. Now keep in mind the year is 1100 BCE. And we have entered and settled the Promised Land, but we are also split into two distinct nations. So you have the tribe of Judah and Benjamin to the south, and then you have the 10 northern tribes to the north. The 10 northern tribes are known simply as Israel, and then the two tribes to the south are just simply known as Judah. Now at this point, both are being attacked by the nations that surround them. Both live under the thumb of the Philistines. As separate nations, they are too disorganized and too weak to fight back. They asked Samuel, a great prophet and the last of the judges, to appoint a king to rule over them. Though we yearned for a Jewish king to rule and make us a powerful nation, in truth, the monarchy itself lasted a total of 80 years. 80 years, that's how long it took for the whole thing to essentially fall apart. Now, of course, we've had other great kings past those 80 years, but understand that the unified monarchy in which we had a king to rule over the north and the south simultaneously was only 80 years. Now, Samuel is hesitant to appoint a king because only God is supposed to be the king of Israel. Samuel anoints Saul at God's behest. God tells him to heed their command and appoint a king for them. So again, Samuel anoints Saul from the tribe of Benjamin. Now Saul is reluctant to take the job, and the Jews aren't too sure about him either. Then he proves himself in a battle against the Philistines, and he takes the job with the Jews' support. He successfully defends the nation against their enemies and pushes back the Philistines. He is publicly declared the king of Judah and Israel. Saul enjoys some success in the beginning, and then God commands him to wipe out the Amalekites. Now, the Amalekites have been an enemy of Israel ever since we were wandering through the desert. King Agag was infamous for killing women and children in battle. God gives Saul the command to eradicate them completely. Saul defeats the Amalekites in battle, but he keeps their king Agag alive, disobeying God's command. Now Samuel is livid. Saul asks for forgiveness, but Samuel tells him, "You have rejected the Lord's command, and the Lord has rejected you as king over Israel." Samuel then has King Agag brought before him, and Samuel cuts him into pieces. So now we have to find a new king, as God has officially rejected Saul as king for disobeying God. Enter David. Samuel, at God's command, anoints David as king in secret so Saul doesn't kill him. David is now the divine king of Israel, but only his father and brothers know about it. Saul begins to turn bitter as the Spirit of God's support leaves him. The court hires a harpist to lift Saul's mood, which is none other than David. Turns out David is an amazing harp player. Not only is the new king right in front of Saul, but Saul's daughter also falls in love with David, and Saul's son Jonathan becomes his closest friend. The two are essentially like brothers. The Philistines prepare for a massive attack, and a giant steps forth. Enter Goliath. He challenges Saul to champion warfare. No one from Saul's army accepts the challenge until David steps up. Goliath charges David, and David places a rock into a slingshot and launches it directly at his head, knocking out the giant. Then David takes Goliath's sword and cuts off Goliath's head. David holds Goliath's head up, and the Philistines run in fear. Saul, of course, begins to get jealous as people are starting to support David, so Saul places David at the forefront of battles, hoping that he gets killed. But David is continuously more and more victorious, and while doing so, earns the support of many Jews. The Philistines launch a massive offensive in which Saul's son Jonathan is killed, along with 2 of his 3 brothers. As the battle continues, Saul is struck by arrows. He knows he won't recover, so he decides to fall on his own sword. That is the end of King Saul. Afterwards, the time has come to anoint a new king. Of course, it is King David from Judah. However, Saul's son Ishbosheth declares himself king of the north, or Israel. A civil war breaks out, and it drags on for years. Slowly, the kingdom of Israel is weakened, and Judah grows stronger. The kingdom of Israel finally surrenders, and David is anointed both king of Judah and of Israel. King David declares Jerusalem the state capital and disassociates it from all the other tribes, all tribes, as to not play favorites. It is there that he builds his city of David. He moves the Ark of the Covenant and the tabernacle to Jerusalem. He defeats the Philistines and the Moabites. King David is so successful that his army is basically operating off autopilot, meaning they don't really need King David in the field. So the commander advises King David to essentially stay home. You don't need to come into battle with us. And while King David is home, he takes a stroll on the palace roof, and he sees a very attractive woman bathing named Bathsheba. She is the wife of a soldier named Uriah. David invites her over, and they sleep together. A month later, Bathsheba tells the king that she is pregnant. King David hurries to cover his tracks. He repeatedly asks Uriah to step away from battle and spend time with his wife. Uriah refuses. David gives up and tells the commander to place Uriah in the front of the battle so he will get killed. So eventually Uriah dies. Now, I like to draw this caveat because many people think that King David's great crime was that he committed adultery. But that's not exactly accurate. King David ordered that all of his soldiers issue their wives a get, or a file for divorce from their wives in case they wouldn't be able to come back from war if something happens. You see, women couldn't remarry unless they got an official divorce. So you don't know if your husband, while he's at battle, is dead or alive if he never comes back. And so it kind of puts a woman in a tough spot because she can't legally move on and marry another if she doesn't know the whereabouts or she didn't get a divorce from her previous husband. And I explain more about that in my King David and Bathsheba presentation, which I will link at the end of this presentation. So again, a month later, Bathsheba tells the king that she is essentially pregnant. And Uriah is essentially killed in battle. She mourns and then moves to the palace to be King David's wife. Now, needless to say, God is displeased. As punishment, King David and Bathsheba's firstborn child dies soon after birth. God also condemns David to live out his days in unrelenting warfare. He tells King David that he won't be the one to build God's temple. His hands will be too soaked in blood. David and Bathsheba have another son, Solomon. David promises Solomon the monarchy. Years later, David is succumbing to old age, and David's oldest, Adoniah, claims to be the next king. Bathsheba reminds David of his promise to Solomon. King David then has the high priest and the court prophet publicly anoint Solomon as king over all Israel. When Adoniah hears this, he comes and begs for mercy. Solomon says he won't hurt a hair on his head as long as he stays worthy. At age 70 and a 40-year reign, King David dies and is buried in the city of David in Jerusalem. Then Solomon begins to clean house. He has Adoniah killed, saying Adoniah shall be put to death this very day. He also kills David's old commander who backed Adoniah's illegitimate claim. He also places the priests who supported Adoniah under permanent house arrest. What follows is political stability that allows for the expansion of the Israelite empire. With it comes a great wealth and success for the nation. Now the time has come for King Solomon to build God's temple. The construction of the temple is one of the largest building projects of the ancient world. It takes both the nation of Israel and Tyre to the north to get the job done. It takes 7 years to build, and the whole time not a hammer or an axe can be heard on the Temple Mount. The components are finished off-site so that the temple construction itself is completed in reverential silence. Upon completion, it is an architectural masterpiece. The land of Israel is protected by King Solomon's wealth, his might, and his alliances. The laws of the land are fair and just due to King Solomon's great wisdom. In fact, that is what King Solomon is most known for, and what I personally admire the most about King Solomon is his wisdom. He is the wisest king the Jews have ever had. There's a well-known story, actually, about his wisdom among the Jewish people. It goes like this. 2 women share a house together, each with their own baby. One of the babies tragically dies. The mother steals the other woman's living infant. The case is brought before Solomon. Standing before the king, each woman claims the baby is theirs. Solomon orders a soldier to draw his sword and cut the baby in 2. He will give each woman half a child. One woman says nothing. Obviously, her jealousy has taken hold. The other screams, "Don't kill the baby. Give her the child. Let her have the child." Now knowing who the child's true mother is, Solomon returns the child to its rightful mother. King Solomon's wisdom can also be found in the books of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Songs. The nation was truly in its prime. Unity, wealth, stability, a wise court system, and a temple in which they can worship God, not to mention the miracles that occurred during the time that the temple was standing. Then, in old age, King Solomon starts to slip. King Solomon has a weakness for excess, and it is his wives that lead him astray. All 700 of them, and I'm sure the 300 concubines didn't help matters. As Solomon gets older, he builds temples for his wives so that they can worship their foreign gods. Eventually, Solomon starts to worship them as well. Displeased with Solomon, God sends him new enemies, and Solomon loses control of Damascus, so he essentially starts to lose territory. Solomon reigned for 40 years and was buried alongside his father in the city of David. Upon Solomon's death, the northern kingdom almost immediately breaks away from the southern kingdom. Rehoboam, the king of Judah and Solomon's son, rules over a fraction of the size of his father's land. So ends the united monarchy that lasted only 80 years. There will be other kings that rise, but none of them would rule over both the north and the south. The northern kingdom of Israel is eventually conquered by the Assyrians. As for the kingdom of Judah, they have a series of kings, but the kingdom exists under a series of ancient superpowers. So it essentially is a vassal state being controlled by another great nation. The next time that the northern and southern kingdoms are united would take place 3,000 years later, which would come to be known as the modern state of Israel that was established in 1948. So, again, I like to point this out because in our history, it has been very rare. 80 years of the ancient world in which we all thrived under one leader. We did that for 80 years, minus the 40 years in the desert. But as we settled in the land, we got along and accepted a king for 80 years. After that, everything fell apart. So again, Jews and being Jewish, Judaism itself has never been a monolith. There's always been this constant infighting, difference of opinions, difference of philosophies, observance levels, etc. I think that it makes us who we are. The Torah actually calls us a stubborn people. Am Kesharov calls us a stubborn people. And I thought that in the light of the 2024 election, regardless to who you voted for, and not to get too political, again, I'm thankful that the election is over and we can move past politics. But to show that though we had our differences as Jews, and still do to this day, we always are united by our history, by the Torah, and by God. So, if you found this presentation helpful and informative, do me a huge favor and hit that like button. Do me an even greater favor and subscribe to my channel. I always appreciate all the support that I am given. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Blade Talk. Be good to yourselves, be good to others, and until the next episode and next Sunday, Shavua Tov, you all take care.